All right, so in this segment, I'm going to take a departure from the pragmatic aspects of Agile as applied at the team level and what planning all means. And I'm going to talk about some cultural stuff. There's a saying out there that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast, which it does. It really, really does. And that's another segment that I'm going to do, which is how you make culture your strategy. And this is a component of that kind of thought, which is your culture is really the thing that gives you everything that you're looking for within your organization. It's going to give you the people that you want who are positive about contributing their energies to that effort that you've brought them together for. So you have to understand how growth actually works. Because what we seek in Agile and in life, frankly, is positive growth. We want the healthiest expression for ourselves and for others that we care about, right? Positive growth. Well, how do we achieve positive growth? Well, it all starts with this very first statement. And we have to understand that all change is predicated on pain. All change is predicated on pain. I'm giving you a moment to think about it. Right now, most of you are going, wait a minute, I can remember when I did this or when I did that. So when I say all change is predicated on pain, we have to think about it as the perception of either possible pain in the future, avoiding pain that we've experienced in the past, or I'm responding to pain I'm experiencing in this moment. Now, in a future state, I'm choosing things that I know will avoid pain, right? I'm trying to make the best choice possible. So I don't want to eat gravel, I want to eat ice cream. I'm making the appropriate choice. That is how I'm avoiding pain. I avoid pain by reflecting on my past, and if I am objective in the analysis, then I get a clearer understanding of why I may not have accomplished that thing, or why my relationships fail, or whatever it might be. Then I can make choices to avoid those same decisions or those same experiences that brought that pain. All change is predicated on pain. All of it. So if that's a truth, if that's a given, then we say, therefore, growth, all growth, comes through adversity. It is either the desire to avoid adversity or the desire to engage adversity for the benefits it might bring from one discipline or another. But it's going to be adversity that forces the growth. So that adversity is going to be, which is either structured or unstructured. So growth comes through adversity, which is either structured or unstructured. Well, it can be a mix, right? Which is most growth is a mix of these two elements, nature, nurture. Sorry, I've said it, nature, nurture. Structured or environmental. Environmental means there's no control over it. You step outside, you're subject to the weather. That's just the way it is. If there's a thunderstorm and you don't have an umbrella, you're going to get wet. You're going to get wet. Structured is understanding that the weather may change and you have an umbrella. You're not going to get wet. Structured adversity. It's understanding that if I must go in the rain, there are things that I can do to protect my health from that exposure if it's cold, or if it's whatever the case might be. But it's either going to be structured or environmental. Naturally, it's a blend. It's what we all experience in our personal growth. But organizations want to avoid environmental. Well, why? What's the problem with environmental? You'll notice that I wrote in red, and I'll put up a clean version of this in here somewhere, beginning, middle, end, for you all to pause and read. But I'm reading it through and I'm kind of extrapolating from it. I really didn't want to do this. I wanted to get this out. So environmental is reactive. So we have to think about it this way as well. I've talked about this before in the planning. If we make choices from the reactive base, which is really emotional, experiential, and expectation, then we are not going to be able to have that moment of thought where we can make the healthiest choice for us in that environment, for whatever the situation might be. I'm sorry, but I'm picking up a little askew and it's bothering me. There we go. So proactive versus reactive. Proactive is being able to look at what's going on and remove yourself from the expectation of an outcome based on previous emotions and experiences that you've had in a similar context. You want to pause and think about what the true possibilities are that are available in this moment to you. Because the truth in change, what we now call in many technologies disruption, is that it's just opportunity misspelled. If you take a step back, in every disruption there's an opportunity. If we look at what may be going on right now in the automotive industry, yes, we're moving towards autonomous vehicles. What does that really mean? Let's think about that in the next 3 to 15 years. If all vehicles become autonomous, why should anybody own a vehicle? Because if the vehicle is autonomous, it means that algorithms can be applied by which vehicles can be shared. So now all your mass transit and your habitats are autonomous vehicles that are paid for by the populace through a service tax. WAD. And it's like city Uber. Sorry, Uber, but I know that you're making huge investments in autonomous fleets right now, thinking about how this is going to be privatized in action. But in time, it only makes sense that it's all handled in one place and we minimize the costs and expenses and everybody shares it through algorithms. So let's free up parking spaces. Let's free up roadways. Let's find new ways of returning some resources and time back to humanity. So this is something that's going to be changing. How do you take advantage of that now? If you can understand the trends, if you're perceptive enough to see it as an opportunity and not a threat, and double down on the taxi industry. Now is a great time to get into the taxi industry. No. It's like investing in oil. Short term, it might be okay, but not going to work. So anyway, we want to be proactive to what's going on. We want to view that disruption as that opportunity, not as something to fear or something to hedgehog against or to fight against, right? That becomes reactive in nature. So environmental brings reactive. If we're not paying attention to how we're growing, we're subjecting ourselves to the environment and we're becoming reactive to what's occurring based on our previous experiences of being buffeted horribly by that environment. So all growth is responsive to survival. All growth is responsive to survival in an environmental adverse condition, right? You're out on a hike. You're up on a 14er and it's near dusk. And in your backpack, you don't have the right gear. Everything you do from that moment on to get down off the mountain is in response to that environment that you're reacting to in order that you don't die. So environmental is reactive, which means all growth is in response to survival and leaves unresolved. And here I've put institutional because I'm talking in the bigger scale, but at the micro scale, it's the same thing. Unresolved traumas that inhibit positive growth towards full potential as decision making is reactive based on those past traumas. This is PTSD. Now we joke, corporations are human. Well, yes, they are. They're filled with humans, therefore they are subjected to the same things that humans are. And as a close group, there's a thing called trauma bonding. That's what military boot camps thrive on. You have such a strong connection to these other people because you shared that adversity. And in there, it's a very harsh, structured adversity for a purpose. But you shared that adversity and no one else understands it like you. And therefore, you're conditioned to behave in a similar way. And if you all experience the same trauma, to some extent, you're all going to experience the same concerns that come from unresolved traumas. The desire to respond as if the trauma were still now. I've had PTSD, not from my time in the military, which says something. All right? You're incapable of making a positive decision for yourself because you're trapped in an infinite regression loop of doing the same thing because you're trying to resolve the initial trauma through replay, and it never works. Ever. And we see corporations do this. We see corporations do this. What we want to do is move away from this reactive nature of response towards change in environment because it's disruptive to our own health. We're not doing the right thing. If we're not doing the right thing, we're certainly not making the right choice, which means what little we're hanging on to, we're in a survival mode, is going to dwindle quickly because we're consuming that what little resource we have just to survive. We're not making any progress towards the future because we're stuck in the past. I've seen it. I've worked with corporations that have experienced this. I've talked to teams that have dealt with this very issue. That you don't frame it as PTSD. No, but it is. So how do you change that? You get them to recognize that they're no longer in this environment, which means that their culture, if the culture of the organization was such as to create this, and I've seen and been in those, how do you get out of this? By moving into this, by trying and getting into a structured, proactive approach to adversity. To resolve trauma, you must first understand what the root cause of trauma is. That's transparency in Agile. How did we get here? What brought us here? Not who, never who. We don't care about who. This is not about ego. This isn't about who did what to whom. Let's not bicker and argue about who kills who. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. Oh, that was horrible. I can do better, but I can't hear myself. And by the way, the question has been asked, why the headphones? I actually am listening to music while I'm doing these things because if I listen to myself, I become my own audience, and that never ends well for anyone, ever. So anyway, the goal is to get them out of here, and we do this first by transparency, by an outside intervention must occur, which means leadership has to take a hand in the resolution. If leadership doesn't take a hand in any process from changing from a responsive set of behaviors within that team, group, business unit, line of business, the enterprise, whatever you want to call it, if there isn't outside intervention, it will never systemically change itself to more healthy behaviors. Never. Incapable. You can't get over PTSD on your onesies. I've tried. It didn't work. You need therapy and people who understand what that is that you're going through in order so that you feel safe enough to talk to them about your experience. Because people who don't experience these traumas and these conditions don't get it. It's a hangnail compared to a compound spiral fracture. It's not the same. So you must bring that transparency into play. That transparency then allows to understand root cause, what brought us here, and then when you understand what brought you there, you can begin to understand what is going to move you out of there. You begin to build a plan of activity that moves you forward because you recognize not just what brought you there, but the things that you desire in order to fix these problems. What then becomes the best solution in order to resolve this reactive set of environmental conditions that is causing this continual degradation of performance again and again and again, to such a point that, again, you achieve what I call an employee extinction event. It's so, to quote Better Off Ted, horrific, people leave. They're done. Their passion is so gone, they're caught in the passion pit for too long. The belief that their commitment and belief and dedication can change the environment without external intervention. That's the passion pit. And after a certain point, they get tired and build a ladder, climb out and walk away. And I've done that also. So environmental is very bad. It's really bad. And what it means, if you have this going on, is that if all change is predicated on pain and the only change that occurs through the environmental conditions in place is churn in your employees, you have a very high, what I call, pain threshold. And the goal is really to lower the pain threshold of the organization. And you do that by structured adversity, by understanding what you're going into, so that when it's necessary to have a critical response to an emergent condition that you don't have a structured path for, you've been rigorous and disciplined in your behaviors over here to be responsive and not reactive, because you know if you think for a moment, you'll come up with the right course of action. Your training and experience and education and mentorship and all the other things that you have done to educate you and to condition you to be as good as you are in what you do can be brought to bear to this moment without leaving unresolved trauma. The goal is to never have unresolved trauma, but to manage the situation so well as that there wasn't any trauma at all. What does that mean? It says, so that means positive growth uses structured adversity paired with something, a unified vision. There's got to be a purpose for what we're doing. I alluded to it throughout here. There's training, education, mentorship, whatever it might be. There's somebody there guiding you, and you have a reason why you're doing these things. Otherwise, you're maybe a masochist, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that might just be your purpose. But maybe you would prefer to live over here. That may get edited out. I'm pretty sure it will at some point. Anyway, so what does structured mean? Let's go to structured. It will get edited out because I brought myself to the wrong place. Or, I could just leave it in there and say that's who I am. I'm kind of a blue-collar agilist. I have nothing against anyone. I use turns of phrases to illustrate points. I can be provocative at times with the way I position things. I can be divisive at times with the way I approach things. And the goal is to get you to look at it suddenly, right? From a way that you may not have before, removing complacency from the equation. Complacency is the thing that says, no, I know what you're talking about. No, maybe you don't. It's a rhetorical device. It is a debate technique at times, but it is effective in nature by getting people to awareness, which is what we always want to be in whatever we're doing in life, is to be aware, consciously aware of this moment in time so that I can make the best decision possible that's going to benefit myself and the others who are involved in this moment and situation with me, right? Want the best for myself and everyone else. Nothing wrong with that. Every business should be looking to the same thing. So a structured or proactive approach to adversity, growth through adversity, is to be aligned to a passion or a purpose. There's a reason why you're going to put yourself through the rigors you're about to put yourself through, right? Good friend BJ Miller, she's a gold medalist. Sydney, there was a reason. She had a passion to be the world's best swimmer, one of the world's best swimmers. Right? It's just the way that is. You have a passion and a purpose that puts you through the rigors to achieve the discipline, to have the ability to execute at the level that you want. Karate, yellow belt, brown belt, red belt, blue belt, purple belt, black belt, 2nd degree black belt, 3rd degree black belt, 4th degree black belt. How many Dan are you, right? There's levels upon levels, and we put ourselves into these conditions so that we do get disciplined. There's a desire for it. There's a purpose, a passion, and a purpose, right? Which means that you have training and activities, education and study, work even, and experimentation that are all aligned to this passion and purpose to ensure that you're receiving the appropriate education, experiences, and learning from those experiments so that you can become better and better. This fulfills the maximum potential, not just of the individual, but of the organization if you're doing it holistically. This fulfills the max potential at that phase of growth. At that phase of growth. To ensure healthiest positive expression. Why pause at that phase of growth? Because we're always in change. Nothing remains static. There's a desire to move towards conservatancy. Once we achieve a certain measure of security in our resources. Be that money, be that emotional relationships, be that however you want to account for it. For a business, it's money, right? Whether it's stock that's been purchased or products sold, whatever that measure might be. But in this moment of time, it's going to change, and you have to be thinking about what the next positive expression is going to be. So you're constantly looking ahead, and to understand that, you have to be looking at where you just came from and learning from where it didn't quite go so well. This continuous improvement. So we're starting to see how Agile is playing a role, not just in bringing transparency and transformation to this organization, but by introducing self-organization around the purpose by which we've all brought them together, and giving them the opportunity, the full opportunity, to have everything they need, the full and free transmission of all information and data necessary to the best possible expression of execution for the task at hand. That's what we're talking about. Agile brings that transparency in here. It brings that rigorous study of behaviors so that we can start leaning out those processes, focusing on what the right activities are at the right time to ensure that we have a healthy and responsive, proactive organization that is capable of managing not just change, but treating every significant change as opportunity for further growth and positive expression, and not more unresolved trauma that you're going to go drink off or smoke off, depending on where you live, at the end of the day. Avoid the passion pit. If you're committed and caught in an environmental set of conditions that aren't changing, make a recognition early on. Leave. It's unhealthy. Find a place that's going to be structured for you. If you can affect positive change, affect positive change. Can an individual from inside be that external changing force? It can happen spontaneously at times if the organization allows for it. But if the organization doesn't allow for it, then these are a set of behaviors that they are encultured to as their norm. That's not wrong. There are people. When I was going through the worst of what I was going through with my PTSD and getting through to come to resolution with it, there was a whole world of people I alienated because they did not know how to talk to me. Because I wasn't present. No harm, no foul. I'm not mad at anyone. I make a clear recognition. Probably the safest thing to do. And that's why I withdrew for a period of time. So I would remove that kind of incoherent response to present conditions and remove the confusion. No one should find this to be a normal. In business, we call this a hero culture, where it's required sacrifice time and again to deliver what little we deliver. Holding it together at all costs. We can do this. Someday, we'll get to here. Someday. But if you never get to here, it's never going to happen. It's going to continue to fall apart at some point in its process or progress because it's incapable of sustaining growth. This is entropy in action. This is entropic behavior. Systemic neglect is entropic behavior. Systemic neglect is wild nature. Go outside. Go walk in the woods for 5 days. Don't bring food. Don't bring a tent. Don't bring camping gear. Don't bring bear spray. See what happens. If you want to go to a 4 or 5 day camping trip, make sure you understand where you're going. Make sure you understand the flora and the fauna, where it's safe to camp, where it's not, how to protect your food. Are there bears? Do you need bear spray? What are the concerns and what time of year is it? Is it appropriate to go camping? Do you have the right gear for how cold it might get at night? Death by exposure or in a wonderful, rigorous, invigorating camping trip. All change is predicated on pain, past, present, or future. Therefore, all growth comes through adversity, and the question is, what's it going to be? It's either going to be structured or environmental. If you're subject to the winds of the environmental, you stunt your growth. because you were constantly trying to resolve what happened, and there's no room to get to the future. We live in both of these. The goal is try and live as much as possible here, whether as an individual or an organization. So that's my view on culture, because it's the culture of the organization in which you work or the culture of the community in which you live that either feels like this or like this. And if you can't make this to this, then I'm going to be very clear on this one. You have chosen to be here when you should be looking for a place here. So remember, positive growth uses structured adversity paired with a guiding vision to achieve desired healthy outcomes. Kids need discipline. In the military, there's a very clear understanding. You need a commander's intent, a left and right limit. If you have that structure in place, people will figure out how best to achieve the mission. That's Agile once again, empowering every voice at every level to lead at every level or decentralized decision making. Structured adversity is really an Agile culture because you're constantly looking at where you're at, where you just came from, how better can you move forward, what are the right decisions, and are we doing the right things at the right times for the things we say we're going to do? And checking in regularly to understand, does this guiding passion and purpose still apply to us, or do we need to find a new one in order to evolve?